So you just embiggen like this, embiggen, 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 and then you just kind of like smooth it off around the sides. I mean, I can't even see what I'm doing, but I can feel that my aura has become wider, and suddenly I feel more confident. I am Caitlin Moran, author, columnist, screenwriter, North London's fourth most funny feminist, and this is My Life in Objects. And the first one is Rimmel Liquid Black Eyeliner. When I was growing up, my templates for womanhood there were two. It was a binary choice. You were either a humorless Dow feminist who never wore makeup and was not a fun person, or you were a broad or a dame from 1950s musicals and movies, and they all wore bright red lipstick. And I was absolutely convinced that I would need to wear lipstick in order to be a funny, brilliant broad, a dame, the kind of chick who gets things done and gets to bang Cary Grant. And I've spent my entire life trying to find a lipstick that would work. I love the idea of red lipstick. Here I will show you a collection of some of the lipsticks that I have collected over my life. Pot 1. Pot 2. Those are just the ones that I could find now. I have collected millions over the years. I've tried everything I can to be a broad or a dame that will wear red lipstick. And I finally realised about 5 years ago that I'm not a lipstick person. It's never going to work. The idea of adorning your mouth, however beautiful it may seem, will not work for me, because this is where all the action happens. The idea of basically smearing this portal, which I use for smoking and drinking and talking and kissing and often falling onto if I'm drunk, and then smearing it with like an easily removable dye or pigment that will be smeared over my face like a clown within 30 seconds or just simply eaten off, is ridiculous. It's a completely impractical thing for someone as mouthy as I. And that was when I realised that the actual two kinds of women there are lipstick ladies and eyeliner ladies. If you're going to adorn anything on your face, make it your eye. If you put black eyeliner on your eyes, first of all, you make them bigger. Eyes are the windows to the soul. It makes you look more soulful. It makes you look more clever. And secondly, there's very little traffic on the eye. I'm never trying to put a cigarette in my eye. I'm not drinking through my eye. I'm not trying to get off with anyone with my eyes. If I put some makeup on here, it's going to stay here all day. And of course, the longer you make it, the better you look. Because what I'm trying to do is not to be a sexy lady. What I'm trying to do is to look like the bird, the puffin. If you observe from the side, this is like the long black streak of the puffin I associate with the puffin. I'm a small round bird. I usually dress in black and white and I wear very long black eyeliner. I'm not trying to be a sexy lady. I am a puffin, all thanks to liquid eyeliner. This is Rimmel Black Liquid Eyeliner. I've tried many different kinds of eyeliner over the years. I've tried really expensive ones. I've tried ones that are pastes in little pots that you apply with a special brush. First of all, that's never going to work. If to make my eyes look good, I need two things, a pot and a brush, I'm never going to have those two things in the same place at the same time. I've tried taking the brush with me in a handbag. It just becomes covered in dust and grue and grit and oompscat. And then when I apply it in the pot and put it onto my eye, I'm just basically painting trash onto my lids. This, it's all in one. It's super cheap. It never moves. You can buy it anywhere. In emergencies, anywhere in the world, you'll always be able to find black eyeliner. The only time that's never worked was when I had to get straight off a plane in America and do an interview in the airport because my schedule was really tight and I'd forgotten my black liquid eyeliner and I had to take a Sharpie and draw my eyeliner on with a Sharpie. And I can tell you that is quite effective, although I did get a massive rash and eyelid swelling afterwards, so only in emergencies. I think it just swelled so much that the eyeliner just became sort of disparate and it just became a grey smudge. Yeah, Sharpies hurt. They are definitely, keep the Sharpie on the page would be my advice. It does not do well on an eye. You'll see on the packets, it probably says, don't put on your eyes. If it doesn't, it's because they would never presume anybody would be as stupid as me. But yeah, don't put a Sharpie on your eye. Stick to that stuff. The comb. The backcombing comb. So, when I was growing up, everything that I absorbed culturally was mainly from the 19th century. We didn't have a TV for about 4 years. It was taken away from us because we had no money. As it was taken out of the house, all the kids were crying, going, "That's our real mother! That's the thing we love the most! Please bring the television back!" But it was gone. So all I had was books, and the books that I loved were 19th century books because they were always about odd working class girls struggling against the patriarchy, usually from big families with no money. And that was very much my situation. I was the oldest of 8 children. We lived in a council house. We had no money. And the patriarchy's everywhere. I don't even need to mention that. That guy's everywhere. So the books that I read were usually 19th century books. And in all of those books, girls had big hair. They were basically hair farmers. All they had to do was just eat all day and grow their hair as long as possible. And then they would pile it up on their head and it would look fantastic. And that is the hair that I craved. I wanted gigantic, huge hair. And I did not know how you made hair become huge on your head. In 19th century books, they talk about rats, which maybe they were originally real rats, but are supposed to be pads of like material that you pin onto your head and then you arrange the hair around them. So when I first started putting my hair up, that was what I did. And I used my mum's terry tally nappies that she used on the kids. And I would roll these up and pin them to my head and then sort of sculpt my hair around them. That had the unfortunate byproduct, if you went out in a brisk wind, the wind would part the hair and reveal a white terry tally nappy on your head, which contributed to the amount of bullying that I got whenever I left the house. There's nothing more bullyable than a 13-year-old girl with a nappy on her head, I found out as I walked through Wolverhampton Town Centre. Then one day I left the 19th century and came into the 20th century and learned about backcombing in the 60s. All the girl groups in the 1960s backcombed their hair. Here was their usual schedule. They would wake up, they would have 20 cigarettes, they'd be fighting the patriarchy, and then they would backcomb for 9 hours and make massive beehives on their head. And once I learnt the technique of embiggening, simply using a comb and no other accessories, I became free. Within 30 seconds, I could simply rat up my hair and make it as gigantic as I wish. Look at this. I've got it really short at the moment, but as soon as I backcomb, look at the embiggerment on this. Look, 1 story, 2 story, 3 stories high. I suddenly had all the hair that I craved. This is a look I would wear out. So the comb set me free. Again, it was cheap. And it meant the other thing about having, if you're poor, you probably won't be able to afford accessories. You won't have any jewellery. Makeup might be too expensive. But hair, simply with a comb, becomes your greatest accessory. And the great thing about having big hair, and big hair being your most beautiful thing, is you can't lose it when you're drunk. You can't break your hair. You're not going to leave it in the back of a cab. Your hair is just stuck to your head all night, looking fantastic. And that is why I believe the embiggerment of hair using a cheap comb is one of the greatest assets a girl can have. Backcombing tips would just be, just do it till it hurts. I mean, I'm not even looking now. I'm just doing it. And when I feel my scalp starting to become slightly agonised, I know it's probably quite big. The worst thing my kids can say to me if I walk into a room is, "Mum, your hair looks small." They know that stabs me right in the heart. I want embiggened hair. These are a selection of my teenage diaries. I started them when I was 11 and I went right through to 16. One of the biggest regrets in my life is that I did not then continue my diaries. But by the time I was 16, I was working as a journalist and I was writing for cash, and that was my job. And the idea of spending all day writing and then coming home and writing some more not for cash suddenly became very unappealing. But there's a million reasons why you should keep a diary when you're a teenager. The first one is about your sense of self and your voice in your head. So when you're growing up, the way that we learn to think and to talk when we're babies is, if I fall over and I'm a baby, my mum will go, "Oh, did you fall over? Did it hurt? Are you okay? Let's sit over here." And then that's the voice you have in your head next time you fall over. You go, "Oh, did I hurt? I have fallen over. I will sit here." So you start off with your parents' voice in your head, and then the whole difficult business of adolescence is slowly you have to, shunt your parents' voice to the side and start hearing your own voice. And we never even talk about this being a process. You're just supposed to get on with it. And as a consequence, it can be quite difficult because sometimes you don't go from your parents' voice to your own voice. Maybe you'll have a bad boyfriend who goes, "Oh God, the way you laugh, you show your teeth and that's really ugly." Or you'll have a teacher just going, "Oh, you'll never amount to a thing." Or you'll have some really bitchy friends just going, "Oh, you're the fat friend then, stand at the back in the photograph." And you don't ever come into your own sense of voice, or it takes you a very long time and a whole heap of therapy. The great thing about writing a diary is that you hopefully start learning what your voice is. You will start talking to yourself. If you get a diary, a big book full of blank pages, and you're writing down every day what's happened to you, slowly your voice starts to develop on the page. You are talking to yourself. And you also do this brilliant temporal thing in space and time. When you go back and read through your diary from a year ago, you're aware of yourself as a younger person. And hopefully you feel mercy and pity towards that person who was a bit stupider than you are now. And then you'll start projecting into the future. Around about the age of 14, I started writing my books to my future self, going, "Oh, you'll find this amusing. Here's what I did today." And that's an incredibly grounding and reassuring thing to have when you're lost in the storms of your adolescence, to have this idea that you're still in contact with your child self. You never lose your child self. You can still read about it on the page. You can talk to yourself by reading back through your diary. But you're also talking to your future self going, "Oh, okay, future me, I'm hoping that when you're 30, you'll be living in New York and you'll be going out with Edward Scissorhands. How did you get there?" And it starts allowing you to plan how you'll get to your future self. Thinking about yourself and communicating with yourself all the way through time and space. It basically makes you like the Doctor in Doctor Who. It's a good sci-fi tip for staying sane and strong all the way through your teenage years. learn to talk to yourself, leave letters for yourself, leave messages for yourself in the future, and go back and talk to yourself in the past and go, you're not so lonely now. I'm here in the future. It all turned out to be okay. You didn't marry Edward Scissorhands, but that's probably a good thing because he doesn't have hands, he has scissors. And if that went near your nunny, you'd be in terrible pain. Or maybe you would invent a way for Edward Scissorhands to become Edward Handhands, and he would have a hand transplant, and then you could have sex with him. But you're only going to learn how to do that if you're writing to yourself all the time. I don't still keep a diary, and I really regret it. Every morning when I wake up, I go, why didn't I write a diary last night? I should have, because my memory is appalling now. All my teenage years that are in these diaries, I remember so clearly, and they've been incredibly useful for work. When I write about being a teenager, it's all just there, all the pain and confusion. Once I start writing my diaries, I don't really remember what happened. We go on holiday sometimes to a different country, and my husband will go, oh, it's changed since we were last here. I'll be like, we went here before. Literally no memory of this whatsoever. So yeah, in fact, I resolve now, I'm going to start keeping my diary again. When I was a teenager, I didn't want to be sexy or daring or intellectual or bold. I just wanted to be noble. And I would try and write sort of noble and poetic things in my diary. So I've moved my desk. It's beautiful. I can see the television from all corners of the room, and I have a beautiful rain-broken crocus in a wine glass, which looks so pure that I can almost see a tiny Thumbelina hopping out, dressed in a thought and a whisper. When my sister found these diaries and would read out loud pretentious things like this, she would make little comments in the margins, like, well, as here we can see my sister has written, more shit poetry alert. And in a way that was a useful process. We were not a religious family, we didn't believe in God, but when you've got a sarcastic younger sister reading your diary and then making comments on it, it's a bit like being judged by a very angry Old Testament God. Whatever I did, my sister would sit in judgment of it in my diary, and there it is, captured forever. I think my favourite of all the diaries was when I was 11, and it was like the entries for it were, in later years I just got blank books so I could write as much or as little as I wished every day, but in the first diary I was very much confined to the spaces that were allowed, so that was kind of the one for each day. And back in the day they used to have video shops where you would go and hire a video because we hadn't invented the internet yet, and as a consequence we're very sad. And every Thursday we would reserve our 2 videos to watch, and on this particular Thursday we had reserved Howard the Duck and Return of the Jedi. So I'd written a week in advance Howard the Duck and Return of the Jedi to remind ourselves that was the day we were going to watch it. Unfortunately, on that day, my nan died. So the diary entry starts, Howard the Duck and Return of the Jedi, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. And then I've had to scribble it out and go, oh God, Nan died. The pain is unbearable. My heart is breaking. But it still remains that the first entry on the day that my nan died was a reminder that we had for that day reserved Howard the Duck and Return of the Jedi. I then had to wait till the next day to review Howard the Duck in my diary, which I found to be very poor, 4 out of 10. Oh, there's another one here actually. What year is this? Maybe 1985. In the front of the Adrian Mole diaries, which I was obsessed with at the time and have borrowed much of my writing style from, Adrian does a map of his family, the friends and the enemies. So I thought I would steal this conceit and put it in the front of mine. So I've kind of like friends here, family all over here. And then in enemies, I've written Mr. Thompson, who was the headmaster of the school that I went to, who I hated. Sharon Papanick, who was a girl who once opened a can of Coke in my face in a way that I found insulting. Swimming instructors, enough said, in those days they were quite brutal. Then the gas and electricity boards, Mrs. Thatcher, All American Weirdos, Ronald Reagan, Benny Hill, and Dr. Kildare. I don't know if anybody remembers the TV show Dr. Kildare, but I had obviously taken massively against the fictional Dr. Kildare, and there he is in my enemies. I think I must have thought Benny Hill was quite... I think even at that point we were kind of like, me and my sisters had a very strong sense of the patriarchy and of sexism, and when Benny Hill was just chasing schoolgirls around a tree as schoolgirls, we were like, no. Despite what all of culture is telling us right now in 1985, that is wrong. And I think in the future people will know that. And they do! Hurrah! We were right! There's my original name there. I'm not actually Caitlin Moran. I'm actually Catherine Elizabeth Moran. But when I was 13, I read a book by Ginny Cooper where there was a character called Caitlin. And I was like, I want to be like her. Because she was having sex with loads of like sexy jockeys. So that was when I changed my name. But that is my real name there. So the next one is the book Jane Eyre. Now I could have chosen so many books for this. I left school when I was 10. My parents said, do you want to be educated at home? And I said, what would that entail? And they said, well, just do what you want. And I was like, yeah, that sounds great. lots of people, when they talk about home education, there are two kinds of people who do home education. There are the ones who go, we could teach you better than you would be at school. Like, you know, on a walk in the countryside, I can be teaching you about biology and geography and history and all these things. And their parents who want to be better than the teachers in the system, and they can personalise an education and really hothouse their children. And then there are the other kind of home educators who are just like, yeah, I just don't want to have to get socks and pants ready every morning for 7:30. I'm just going to take you out of school. That was my parents. So my entire education was basically sitting at home with my 7 brothers and sisters, watching classic MGM musicals and eating our great invention, which was the cheese lollipop, which is a fist-sized lump of cheese on a fork which you lick while you're watching a musical. So that was basically my education. But the one thing my parents did do was take us to the library every day, sometimes twice a day, and just let us get out whatever books we want. And they would let us use their adult tickets as well, so we could read grown-up books instead of kids' books. And one of the very first grown-up books that I got was Jane Eyre. And this blew my mind because I realised one of the great things about being home educated is I never really read any books by men, and I'm not down on men. They're great. I married one. I've got some friends. I talk to them. I love the Beatles. Men are great. But the way that generally men write about female characters in books, particularly men from the great white authors canon, like kind of Hemingway, Chandler, Updike, Roth, they're brilliant authors. But when in my latter years, I finally got around to reading male authors, the way they would describe women coming into a room, I know that if I'd read that when I was 13, it would have absolutely destroyed me. Like Raymond Chandler, beautiful line, he talks like she was the kind of dame who would make an archbishop kick in a stained glass window. And that's a beautiful sentence. I would die to have written it. It's absolutely gorgeous. It's really funny. But if I'd been reading that when I was 13, I would have thought, oh God, that's what I need to be. I need to grow up to be the kind of woman who will make an archbishop kick in a stained glass window. How am I going to do that? That sounds really terrifying. Can I not just be a funny fat girl in a cardigan who can come in and chat to the archbishop and we can leave the window be? It would have seemed like a massive task and a job at a time when I already felt overwhelmed with tasks and jobs because I was trying to grow breasts and make my hair gigantic. So luckily, all the books I read, subconsciously just chose in the library, were always by women, and they were usually women writing in the first person to a writer, to a reader. And Jane Eyre, she's a working class girl, she's a freak, no one will talk to her, she has no prospects, she doesn't know what she's going to do, she lives in a society that will absolutely oppress her. And she talks so clearly and humorously and confidently about her weirdness and what she wants and her hopes and her desires, her sexual feelings, it's quite fruity, her love, her desire to have freedom and independence. And to read a book like that when I was 13, I genuinely think changed me because she became one of the voices in my head. In bad times, I would just be like, well, however bad this situation is, like, I don't know, my dog had done some diarrhea in the bedroom. However bad this situation is, at least I'm not locked in a cupboard by my evil aunt as an orphan, having watched my best friend die. And at least my future, the best hope that I have for it is not that I'm going to fall in love with this really handsome, sexy man who's already married and that I will only be able to marry when his wife sets fire to herself, burns down the castle and makes this hot dude blind. Like, kind of, that was the best that Jane Eyre had to hope for. I was like, hopefully mine will be better than that. So, yeah, I hugely recommend that girls, if you're feeling a bit weird about yourselves, just give yourself a year off of reading male writers writing about women and just read women writing about women. We talk to each other, we know what's really going on. Men still see us as these sort of mad cartoons to be laid, whereas girls will talk to you about your hair and your body and your weirdness and your loneliness and your desires and hopes to be a better person. And they will nourish your souls and bones. This is my current laptop. It's an Apple Mac laptop. And I've always used Apple Macs. I bought my first Apple Mac laptop in 1992. To which you may say two things. One, hang on, they didn't have Mac laptops in 1992. They did. That was how great Apple Mac were. It was chunky, I give you that. It was this thick and this wide, and it would break your back to carry it. It had a trackball, which was quite pleasant to sort of fiddle around with in times of stress instead of a mouse pad. So they definitely were around in 1992. And the second thing you might say is, but hang on, I thought your whole thing was that like you come from the ghetto and you're like really poor. Like, how are you affording an Apple Mac laptop in 1992? Well, by that point, I'd already become a writer and I'd written a novel. And I'd been given an advance for it, and I spent every penny that I had on buying an Apple Mac laptop because I was a massive fan of Douglas Adams, who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and I knew that he used Apple Mac laptops. And when you start off as a writer, you're really superstitious and you feel like you've got to get your magic and your power from places outside you. You don't realise it's all going to come from your head. You're still like, maybe if I sat in this chair, or if I wore this dress, or if I went to Paris, I would become a better writer. And I had convinced myself if I used the same laptop as Douglas Adams, I would become as great a writer as Douglas Adams. And having a laptop in 1992 gave me the freedom that I continue to enjoy for the rest of my life now. This is my work, everything is in here. I can just stick this into a rucksack and go anywhere and work anywhere. When I was writing How to Be a Woman, I would go down to Brighton because I have a mystical connection with the sea. And I would sit outside Carluccio's with a fag and a hat on to protect me from the sun and my laptop. And I could that was it. That was my office. Like wherever I was, it was all there in my laptop. And of course now, since the invention of social media, this is also my social life. The explosion of social media coincided pretty much exactly with me getting pregnant and starting to have children, and so as a consequence I could not leave the house for a couple of years, because that's what happens when you're a mum, you never get to leave the house. But all my friends were in my laptop. I could simply go onto all these different sort of message boards in the beginning, and then Twitter was invented and Facebook, and most of the people who are my friends now are people that I got to meet through my laptop. This is the party we met at, we would talk to each other. And there's something very beautiful about social media. There are a lot of bad things about it, but I feel we talk about what the bad things are about social media a huge amount. But for me, the great thing about social media is you are not in the meat world. You are in a cyberspace. And that means that it doesn't matter what you're wearing, who you are, what your sexuality is, what your gender is, what your colour is. You are simply your words. You become your ideas, like kind of, you that's all you are. You simply become a disembodied head floating around the internet, and people are either attracted to or repulsed by your thoughts. And in the early days of being on the internet, I used to pretend to be a man. I pretended I was a man called Lord Venger, who wore a cape and lived in a cave and had one horn on his head. And I was on a couple of message boards, and I became a bit of a celebrity on these message boards as Lord Venger. And then one day I announced to all the people on this board that I was actually a woman, and that I was a mother of two, and an overweight woman living in North London. And one of the most sobering things that's ever happened to me happened to that point. Within 2 or 3 minutes, 2 or 3 of the men on that website, who I'd thought were my friends and used to laugh at my jokes, had Googled me because I'd announced my name, had seen a picture of me and started making jokes about how fat I was. And that they speculated that I would have thread veins on my legs, and started making all these horrible jokes about sort of basically how fat and unfuckable I was. And that was another one of those moments where you suddenly, all the way through your life as a woman, you sort of realise the layers of sexism that there are around you. And that was one of my big revelatory moments. When they thought I was a man, they thought I was awesome and they would hang out with me. As soon as they knew I was a woman, the first thing they wanted to do was see if they wanted to fuck me and whether they could basically bully me for how I looked. And it broke my heart at the time. It was a really big lesson to learn that the difference between communicating as a man and as a woman was this huge. But it was also one of the big sparks to make me write How to Be a Woman. I was like, okay, I'm living these experiments now. I need to write a book where we talk about this stuff and put it all out on a page. Because if it's just in my head, it's going to drive me crazy. I need to share this experience, put it down on paper, and have other women go, yeah, okay, I see what's going on there. That's proof, that's evidence. It's not that I'm crazy. The world is sexist and weird. Men do respond differently to men than women. Everything that I write is basically to make people who are reading it go, oh my God, thank God, I'm not crazy. That's happened to you. Okay, good, we can talk about this now. So the new book, and I'll get the merch out here, I designed this cover, by the way. I'm really, really proud of this. I was looking for, usually when you're designing a book cover, they kind of want you to have a sexy girl on the cover, and we kept being sent these brilliant shots of kind of girls in the 90s in kind of sort of states of dissolution. And I was like, no, it can't be a beautiful, slim, sexy girl. That's not my characters, that's not me, that's not the people who read my books. It's got to be someone, and this is a girl who's down the front of a Manic Street Preachers gig in the 90s. And it's at that moment of fandom and happiness and screaming that you have, where you just feel like you're at one with the audience. I read recently, when you're in a crowd, all the people in the crowd's heartbeats sync up. So we really are all beating with one heart when we're at a gig, when we're in a big field or at a gig like this. And that picture is just that moment. She's my girl. And when we released the cover of this book, that girl got in contact with me on Twitter and went, that's me. Oh my God, I'm on the cover of a book. So I need to send her a crate of champagne. Thanks for letting me use your face, love. So yeah, I wrote this book on this laptop. And the idea of the book is about sexual shame, basically. I'd been reading about revenge porn, and I was going, well, what would I do if I was a teenager and my ex-boyfriend or someone that I'd slept with did revenge porn on me? This is an idea I had about 4 or 5 years ago. So I took Johanna, the character from the first book, How to Build a Girl, and we see her 2 years later. It's the height of Britpop. She's surrounded by people who are becoming famous. All her friends are becoming famous, as happened to me at that time. Everyone was famous in 1995. And she's observing them and seeing how they're screwing up. And she decides to write this column being like a fame doctor and giving them advice for how they should cope with fame and how not to screw it up and the best things to do with your new power. And then she has sex with this sexy young rock and roll comedian who makes a sex tape of her and shames her with it. And I wanted to write a book about how you would deal with that. What can you do when you have been shamed for just willingly and, you know, nobly and kindly and generously having sex with a man, and then suddenly he just turns into a massive asshat and decides to use that to shame you. And the whole idea of the book is that, like, the shame is not ours. If you as a woman went and had sex with a guy, you were doing a nice thing, and suddenly he's doing this horrible thing, but the shame is supposed to be on you. You're the one that's trying to remove it from the internet. You're the one that's having to talk to your friends about it. You're the one that's being gossiped about. And I wanted to write a book about how do we overcome that? What do you do if that happens to you? And I was so happy, I can't give away the ending, but I was so happy with the solution that I came up with. And as I was writing it, the whole Harvey Weinstein thing started to happen, which is the plot of the book. Someone famous and powerful is, you know, abusing women sexually and using his power against them. And so the whole thing synced up. It was like, as I was writing this book, it was breaking on the news. I was like, oh, this is great. This is like the novel of this story. Like, this is so, it's like a once in a lifetime thing that happens in your career when you're writing something and the news syncs up with it and you're like, okay, I'm on this. My instincts were good. This is what's happening now. So everyone has a weakness, you know, it might, you know, Indiana Jones has got snakes, you know, it might be a psychological weakness, maybe you weep every time you hear beautiful music and that's been quite embarrassing for you at concerts, or maybe it's a physical weakness, you know, you've got weak wrists, you know, you have an Achilles heel. My Achilles heel is that I have an Achilles urethra. I suffer repeatedly from very bad cystitis. Now, there are two kind of groups of people who have cystitis. There are women who go, yeah, I've had cystitis, yeah, it hurts to pee a bit. And then there are people who go, I have cystitis and it's like death. It is so bad. It is the worst pain I've ever had. I would genuinely take childbirth over cystitis. That's the kind of cystitis I get, proper urethral tract infections. Yes, I'm saying urethral tract infections, feel my realness. All my family used to suffer from cystitis really badly when I was growing up. This was like our, you know, our collective familial problem. I've written about cystitis very extensively in How to Build a Girl, in which I describe it as being like a castle under siege when they're pouring hot oil over the ramparts and there are panicking princesses in pointy hats and their pointy hats are getting jammed in your urethra when you're trying to pee. That's what it feels like. It's horrible. And so for years I just suffered with this terrible thing. And then as I got into my 40s, this is how long it took, I finally realised what the cure for cystitis was, and it is twofold. The first one, and this is probably the most important information you'll ever be given other than register to vote and vote, is every time you have a shag, have a pee straight afterwards. Everything you see in films is wrong. They've finished having a shag and they're lying there and it's all chitty-chatty and maybe they're drinking wine from a particularly big glass and then maybe they'll be gossiping about the legal case because they're two sexy lawyers and they've just had a bang. You don't want to do any of that. Don't talk about legal cases. Definitely don't drink wine. As soon as, the minute the sexing has finished, you say thank you. He says thank you, and then you get up and do a very big wee. I don't care how embarrassing it is. If you want to sing over the tinkling sound, absolutely feel free to do that. 20 seconds ago, he was sitting with his bum on your face and his balls draped over you like a nose bag. You can take the embarrassment of the tinkling sound, but cleanse out your bladder you must. Let all that pee go or else you will get cystitis. And then the second thing is, as soon as you start to feel a twinge of cystitis, and anybody who has cystitis knows what that feeling is, it's like when in Mary Poppins the wind changes and they're all just like, oh, something's gonna happen, oh. You get that kind of wind changing feeling in your urethra, like, whoa, here comes a massive bacterial infection, this isn't gonna be so good for me. You need to take one of these. You find them on the internet. It's called D-Mannose. They're super cheap. This entire bag is £7 and it's got like something like 500 tablets, 120 tablets. There you go. I'm exaggerating. 120 tablets in it. And as soon as you feel a twinge, you just take one of these. They just dissolve in your mouth. They taste fairly pleasant and it makes the twingy feeling go away. If you don't suffer from cystitis, you'll be sitting here going, why is this woman holding up this bag? I don't care. It's, you know, a slightly painful wee. Deal with it. The people who do get cystitis really badly, I've come to save your life. Have a waz after a shag and have a bag of these in your house, in your handbag, in your back pocket, a couple in your bra. Take them everywhere you go, and as soon as you feel that first twinge, get a bit of that down you. When it works for you, no need to thank me. Just send some love from your heart silently into the atmosphere. I will feel that. I'm here for you, sisters with damaged urethras. This is your saviour. a rucksack. This is a particularly tatty rucksack. I've had this one for about 20 years now. The dirt on the bottom is it's done, I think, 4 Glastonburys now. So it's just been dumped in some mud while I've been jumping up and down to Kanye West. And then I've tried to brush off the worst of the umscab. But to be honest, I like the patina, the sheen. It tells a history. This is my social diary. At the point where you realise that it's going to be rucksacks for you from now on is an amazing watershed in your life, because there's all these things that you presume you're going to have to do as a woman when you're younger. You know, I talked about lipstick before. You think you're going to have to find your perfect lipstick. You think you're going to have to find your signature perfume. You think you're going to have to learn how to slut drop and cha-cha and speak French. 43, can't do any of those. Another thing you think you've got to do is find a series of handbags that go with everything. You think you're going to have a clutch. You think you've got to find a tote. You think you've got to find a really great crossbody one in a variety of colours. So whatever the situation is, you'll have a lovely handbag and it'll have all your things in it. Maybe you're even deluded enough to think you'll have a separate little bag with all the key things in it, such as tissues and safety pins and your keys, that you'll transfer from bag to bag. So you've always got the things that you need in whichever bag you have. You'll never do any of this. And there's no point in doing any of this because handbags are bad for you. We are symmetrical creatures. We have 2 shoulders and we rest on 2 legs. As soon as you introduce a bag that you're carrying on one side of your body only, either in your hand or over one shoulder, you're like this. And you will be like this for the rest of your life, because even when you've taken the bag off, you will stay in this position and your spine will go out of alignment and you'll get terrible pains in your pelvis and you'll cry. That was me until 5 years ago. I still believed that I would have to have a handbag, and then I went to see an osteopath and they explained to me that the amount of money in osteopath's fees that it was going to cost to correct the damage my handbag had done was more than the handbag had cost, and that was from Marc Jacobs. And that was the point where I realised I could not be in this game anymore. I can't go along spending hundreds of pounds on bags and then hundreds of pounds on osteopath fees to undo the damage of the bag, when the rucksack is an equally balanced carrying mechanism. I pop this onto my back, one strap on each shoulder, and I'm a balanced person. I have no pelvic problems now. My spine is in alignment. Plus, it's roomier than any handbag you would have, and it means that I can carry around my essentials in it, which are always have some soup. Often when you feel very sad, it's just because you need to have some soup. Always have some soup. And I also carry around a swimming costume and goggles at all time, because in the last couple of years I've started swimming outdoors whenever I can. Whenever I see a pond or a lake or a stream, I'm in there because it gets you very, very high. If you swim out in cold weather, in cold water, you will get out of there feeling like a god. So I always have my swimming costume with me in my bag at all times. If you need any encouragement to always have a swimming costume in your rucksack, I interviewed Benedict Cumberbatch a couple of weeks ago, and he too always carries his swimming costume around in his bag in case he sees some cold water that he can go and jump in and swim around in. So if you have a swimming costume in your bag and you are ready to swim at any time in some cold water, you might be swimming next to Sherlock. I can't think of a better reason to do this. So, this might look like a Sunpat peanut butter jar with a sell-by date of 1983 on the lid, filled with some stones. But what this actually is love. This was the present my brother Eddie, there's 8 of us and he's the 4th one down, gave me for my 10th birthday. And we were very poor. So we could never buy presents. You always had to make them. And this was the present he made me when he was 6. He just got a jar and he washed it out and he filled it with the prettiest stones that he could find in the garden. And then he filled it with water and then put the lid on and gave it to me. The water dissolved decades ago. The stones remain. But I think this is the thing of all the things that I'd be the most upset if I ever lost this. This is like my family in a nutshell. It's just like, we have no money, but we will make a thing. We will fill a jar with love. This is what this means. And it also reminds me of if you come from a big poor family with 8 kids, the admin involved in birthdays is off the fucking shit pipes. There is a constant cycle of arguments. We've only just finished with one birthday and another one happens. And what will happen is 7 of the kids will all contact each other and go, okay, it's old fucking birthday, McGrew's birthday next week. Shall we go in on something? And the in on is a big thing. Everyone will decide on a thing like a dressing gown, and then one person will be assigned to buy the dressing gown, which everyone else will go in on. But then the admin required to work out how much everybody's portion of that dressing gown fee needs to be allocated and when it will be paid, then there'll be cross arguments like, well, you get paid more than me, so I should pay proportionately less. Sometimes the argument will get nasty. I don't have as good a relationship with that sibling as you do. You should pay more. You love them more than I do, or that sibling gets on my tits, so you should be paying £10 and I should only be paying £5 because frankly I can't stand them. And these are the arguments that sustain us. The majority of my relationship with my siblings is arguing about birthday presents and in-ons. But this is pure. Compared to all the arguments we have now, this is pure. Before the age of the in-on, before we had money, before we had to argue about who was going to pay for a dressing gown, we just gave each other stones in jars. And in a way, we were better people then than we are now. I'd be really scared to open it up. Shall I open it up and see what happens? This has not been opened since like 1985. Maybe like a demon will come out or something. Maybe a secret will come out. Maybe when I open it, there'll be like a whisper just going, he's not your real dad. You really were an adopted princess. Oh, you can still smell a faint trace of peanut butter. Well, that tells me that Sunpat is a brand you can trust, because if their peanut buttery smell has managed to sustain from 1985 to 2018, they've got the superior quality peanuts in there. Love. P.S. You're not the best one. I'm Caitlin Moran. Thank you for watching My Life in Objects. What's this? I didn't leave that there. Someone's left that there. This is really embarrassing. But yes, I do have a book out now. It's called How to Be Famous. It's by Ebury. It's a dirty, funny, useful book, but I wouldn't have mentioned it. Someone has just left it here. I'll just put that away.